So, here to hear about a pretty amazing house in Baghdad.
Yes.
Tell me about this house in Baghdad.
Well, it's the house I grew up in. It's at one point it was a place where Saddam Hussein socialized with my parents. It later eventually became a place where there was an execution center, and then it became a brothel.
When was it built?
It was built in 1969, the year I was born. In Iraqi tradition, every child comes with their own blessings for the family, and my parents always told me that it's the blessing that I brought into their lives by building a house, and the year I was born also was the year where my father became a captain. So that house,
A captain?
A captain in Iraqi Airlines. That house witnessed a lot of things. Well, first in the 70s, Saddam used to visit my parents as their friends. It was a forced friendship, and he wanted their friendship. And so, but he was a vice president. He would come in his small car with one bodyguard, and the bodyguard would wait for him in the cul-de-sac in front of the house as he socialized with my parents. Later in the 80s, when he became president of the country, he assigned my father to be his personal commercial pilot. And that's when Saddam used to visit us formally. The cul-de-sac would be filled with his entourage, with the cars, Mercedes and bodyguards and all of that. And it was a big thing in the whole neighborhood when Saddam would visit my family. But there was a lot of fear with that relationship. It's a relationship that was combined with privileges, being so close to Saddam.
Do you remember Saddam Hussein?
Oh, I called him uncle as I grew up. I saw him every
Did he
single
bounce
weekend.
you on your knee? On his knee?
I was a teenager, so it didn't, but I did document a lot of this, my own experience with Saddam Hussein in my memoir, Between Two Worlds, about it. Later on, right after the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, Iraq was destroyed, and my mom has had it. She just said, I am done. Saddam destroyed the country, he destroyed my own family, and I am leaving the country. And that's when she packed up and left to Jordan. And Saddam was very angry at my family. How could my mother betray him like this? How could she abandon Iraq? And he punished us not by killing us or torturing my family members, but punished us through economic sanction. My father lost his job and he suffered economically. And it was also a time in the 1990s in which Iraq faced the economic sanctions, and it was run down, and the house was run down, and the walls were pale, and it lost the life that it once had when my mom was living in it. It took me 9 years to go back to Iraq from 1990 to 1999, and that's when I went back for the first time with my mom's body when she died. And so the cul-de-sac that was once filled with Saddam's bodyguards were now filled with the mourners for my mom's body, for my mom's death. And that was a very important period in my time, and the house was still, it faced its first funeral in the house. Well, life goes on, and I didn't go back to Iraq until the eve of the war, the Second Gulf War, in 2003. And that's when I told my father, we need to clear up the house. This is probably a house that will be attacked if there is an invasion. We need to clear it up from the family pictures and documents. I work with women refugees through my work with Women for Women International. And the first thing I learned is that you keep the pictures and you keep the family documents as the thing that you protect the most when you lose everything. So we cleared the house from all the pictures and all the family documents. The war happened, the invasion took place, but nothing happened to the house. No one touched it. And there was, truth be said, a window of hope and opportunity in the country during that time. That's when my brother wanted to get married. A lot of people thought that the country will be rebuilt and we will have a good democracy and all of that. And we had a big celebration for my brother's wedding. And the cul-de-sac, that again, was once filled with Saddam's bodyguards, and then my mom's mourners, was now filled with my brother's friends and family who were celebrating his wedding. He repainted the house and he refurbished the furniture, and now the house has life again in it, and it's, lights in it, and there are flowers, and everything were beautiful. But then, my brother, as many people in Iraq, got a lot of death threats over his life, and the whole family was very scared for his life, and he left with his newlywed wife at the time to Jordan. And they left everything in the house as
the house is left intact.
Intact, thinking that it's just a temporary stage and they will go back to the country. Well, it took a while for them to go back to the country, and the house was abandoned. So we left it for a family, a homeless family, who we said, why don't you just stay in the house and be able to reside in it and protect it as my own family was out of the country. Overnight, one night, one of the militias came, put guns to their head, and kicked them out of the house over one night. And they took over the house, and they turned it into an execution center. And where the cul-de-sac that faced all of the history that I just told was now an execution center where they killed about 20 men a day, according to the neighbors. The house that I grew up in, the piano I played and practiced over my years, my own room was now occupied by the militia, and I cannot tell you how painful that was for me and for my father and my brothers. And I kept on telling my father, it's okay, it's not us. At least it's just the house. It's not any of our family members that are going through that. And it was very painful. And I kept on telling him, just hold on long enough and everything will be okay. Well, a few months later he called me, and that was about a year ago, and he said, you know, the militia's left, and now it's a prostitute that lives in the house, and now it's a brothel. And the cul-de-sac that was once an execution center and was once filled with the mourners of my mom's funeral and once were filled with the celebrators of my brother's wedding or Saddam's entourage was now filled with customers for the brothels. And I kept on telling my dad, well, at least people are having sex in the house and not being killed. Though I knew that there was a lot of abuses of the women and the prostitutes in there, as the increased prostitution that happened in Iraq right after the invasion, and mostly the increased trafficking of women and girls in Iraq. So I knew that this was still not a good thing. Few months ago, about 5 months ago, my father said, I've had it. I am going to Iraq and selling the house. That's when he learned that the army had taken over the house, and he said, I am selling it, that's it. There is no place for me in this country anymore. And that was perhaps a very sad moment for me, because he was not a political man, but he was a very loving man of the country. He really did love Iraq. He still loves Iraq, but for him to give up, to sell the house, was a sign of giving up on the country, and it was very sad. Well, and he was in pain in the last few months. He calls me every week and he tells me how everything has collapsed. The country is destroyed fully. Nothing is working. Traffic's not working. Ministries are not working. It's just completely destroyed, and he was absolutely devastated. Until last Sunday, when he called, and he was really happy, and it was for the first time that I heard a happy, optimistic voice from my father calling and saying, you know, things are okay now. The election happened in Iraq, and there was a turnover, and there was actually the groups that were trying to divide the country and the religious extremists that were trying to control the country were now replaced by people who are saying it's one country for one Iraq and one Iraqis for Iraq. No, regardless of whether we are Sunnis or Shias or Christians or Kurds or whatever, we are one country for the whole, one people for one country. And he was so happy and optimistic that this new voice coming and taking over the country. And he said, and even KFC has opened in Iraq. And the fact, and he said, it's not the food as much as the owner is not afraid that it will be bombed, and it's a reflection for an improved security. So now my house is still with us, and he decided not to sell the house. And I feel with my dad restoring his hope in Iraq, we should all restore our hope in Iraq. And the question becomes, how can we rebuild Iraq, as my father is hoping to rebuild the house and refurbishing it once again.
So with hope that cul-de-sac will be filled with builders rebuilding Iraq?
Well, the hope is now, I would love to open Women for Women International, expand Women for Women International's operation in Iraq, and maybe it will be a place to service the poor in Iraq and those who are in need, and there are lots of them in the country. So yes, I hope that we rebuild the country and create new jobs and new opportunities and new notions of hope in the country.
Okay, we'll look forward to hearing the next chapter of that cul-de-sac.
We'll see.